In the business class cabin, a young CEO raises her glass of wine, her voice thick with disdain. This isn't your place. A single dad like you belongs in economy. The passengers burst into laughter. A man in a casual shirt remains calm as he fastens his daughter's seatbelt. Suddenly, the intercom crackles. This is the captain. Is there a fighter pilot on board? The entire cabin goes silent. The CEO stops laughing, her eyes wide as she stares at the man she just humiliated. The only person who could save them all. What happens next will shock you. Meet Ethan Ward, a 36-year-old single father and former fighter pilot turned aeronautical engineer. Every morning at 5 a.m., he's already awake, making breakfast while his 8-year-old daughter, Sophie, sleeps peacefully upstairs. Ethan's story is atypical. 3 years ago, his world came crashing down when his wife, Sarah, died in a car accident. But this decorated military pilot suddenly finds himself facing the most challenging mission of his life, raising a little girl alone. In his wallet, behind a photo of Sophie, lies a silver pilot's badge. Almost every day he forgets. It's there, but Sophie knows. She knows that her dad once flew faster than sound, above the clouds, protecting people he will never meet. Daddy, can you still fly planes? Sophie asks every few weeks, her tiny fingers tracing the paper airplanes she's drawn. Maybe someday, honey. Ethan always replies, even though he hasn't touched the controls of a plane in 3 years. This morning is different. Today they are boarding an international flight. Ethan has just landed a major contract as an aviation consultant overseas. This is their chance to start over, maybe even buy that house with the big backyard Sophie always dreams of. At the airport, Sophie clutches her favorite drawing, a stick figure, her dad flying a blue plane through clouds of cotton balls. Her backpack is stuffed with colored pencils and sketchbooks. She's sure they're embarking on the greatest adventure of their lives. First class. The gate agent double-checks their boarding passes. Ethan nods. The airline has paid for premium seats. This time, he and Sophie will travel in comfort. As they walk down the jetway, Sophie jumps with excitement. Dad, are we really flying to the luxury cabin just today? Princess. Sophie takes her seats in business class. Her eyes widen at the spacious cabin, leather seats, many bottles of water already waiting for her. She's never experienced such luxury. Ethan helps her fasten her seatbelt and then settles into his seat. Other passengers in expensive suits and with designer bags take their seats around them. With the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to first-class service, Isabella Lane, 30, CEO of a tech startup, enters, dressed in designer attire. Her family's wealth allowed her to earn a Harvard education, start her own company, and acquire a sense of superiority. She glides to her seat in the front row, already surveying the cabin with a familiar disdain. Her gaze falls on Ethan and Sophie. Ethan is wearing a simple button-down shirt and khakis, nothing expensive, but clean and pressed. Sophie is in her favorite unicorn t-shirt and light-up sneakers. Isabella, they shout, she doesn't belong here. She whispers to her assistant, how did they manage to get first-class seats? The assistant shrugs. Maybe they won a contest. Isabella's perfectly painted lips curl into a smirk. Meanwhile, Ethan helps Sophie organize her charitable causes. She pulls out her drawings, including one of her dad in a pilot's uniform, with silver wings on his chest. Can I show everyone my drawings? Sophie asks innocently. Maybe later, dear. Let's let people get settled first. Sophie nods cautiously, tucking the drawings back into her backpack. She doesn't notice Isabella watching, the CEO's flawless face written in disapproval. As the plane fills, Isabella's irritation grows. She paid $30,000 for this seat. She earned it through hard work and family connections. These people clearly don't understand the unspoken rules of first-class travel. The flight attendant begins the safety briefing. Sophie watches with interest, pointing to the emergency exits. Dad, why are they showing us where the doors are? Just in case we need them, Ethan explains quietly. But we won't. He has no idea how wrong he is. Wait, tell me, what city are you watching from? It's amazing how far stories like this can spread. Subscribe if you want to watch the story unfold with us. Now, back to the table, where everything has changed. 20 minutes after the show began. In flight, Sophie discovers an entertainment screen. But instead of watching cartoons, She pulls her father's old pilot's license from her jacket pocket. The laminated card shows a young Ethan in uniform, wings pinned to his chest, his gaze fixed solemnly on the camera. Sophie slowly runs her finger over the engraved letters. Major Ethan Ward, United States Air Force. She reads each syllable with pride. Isabella's ears perk up. She turns in her seat, studying the card in Sophie's hands. Plastic toys, she says, loud enough for the passengers nearby to hear. How symbolic. Sophie looks up, confused. That's not a toy. That's Daddy's real pilot's license. Isabella's laughter sounds like breaking glass. Honey, real pilots don't sit here with their children. They fly the plane. Several passengers chuckle. The sound makes Ethan's jaw tense, but he speaks in a soft voice. Sophie, put that away, please. But, Dad, I wanted to show you. Not now, princess. Isabella doesn't finish. She stands, glass of wine in hand, addressing the passengers as if giving a presentation in a boardroom. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a situation here. Her voice is theatrically alarmed. It seems we have passengers who have confused this cabin with, well, something more suitable for their demographic. The businessman in seat 3A snorts with amusement. Don't embarrass us in first class, he exclaims. Exactly, Isabella continues, emboldened. This is a seat for professionals, people who have earned their seat through success, not for anything else. She points dismissively at Ethan and Sophie. More laughter rolls through the cabin. Not everyone participates, but enough to create a wall of ridicule around the father and daughter. Sophie's eyes fill with tears. She doesn't understand the words, but she understands the cruelty. Daddy, why are they so mean? Ethan's hands curl into fists, then slowly relax. He's faced enemy fire, survived combat, stared death in the face countless times, but nothing prepared him for watching his daughter's innocence trampled by strangers. He takes a deep breath, looks Isabella straight in the eyes. Ma'am, we have every right to be here. Our tickets are valid, just like yours. Isabella smiles. Predatory, but proper, sweet. Verisimilitude isn't about tickets, it's about belonging. It's about understanding social hierarchy, which you clearly don't understand. She turns to a passing flight attendant. Excuse me, there seems to be a seating mismatch. These passengers are more suited to the back of the plane. The flight attendant, a woman in her 40s named Janet, stops and assesses the situation. She's seen other arrogant passengers, but this one seems particularly cruel. Sir, may I see your boarding passes? Janet asks Ethan politely. Ethan pulls out the tickets. Janet examines them carefully. These seats are assigned correctly, she states firmly. These passengers have every right to be here. Isabella's cheeks flush under her makeup. This is ridiculous. Do you know who I am? A passenger, just like everyone else, Janet answers calmly, before moving on to the next question. But Isabella is undeterred. She raises her voice again. That's what's wrong with airlines today. No standards, no class distinctions. Anyone with a credit card thinks they can buy themselves a seat reserved for those who are better off. A businessman in seat 3A raises his glass. There, some people need to know. If I were them, echoes a woman across the aisle. I paid good money not to sit next to that. The ridicule intensifies. Sophie buries her face in her father's arm, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Ethan wraps his arms around his daughter, shielding her from the cruelty. His voice remains steady, but his eyes blaze with suppressed fury. Sophie, listen to me, he whispers. These people don't know who we are. They don't know what we've been through, what we've sacrificed, what we've achieved. One day they will understand. Isabella hears this and laughs mockingly. Oh, that's ridiculous. What did you earn? Participation Award, Employee of the Month, a parking space. She takes another sip of wine, feeling invincible thanks to the crowd's support. Let me guess, she continues. You're some kind of mechanic, maybe a security guard? Definitely a blue-collar worker. Definitely not first class. The cabin erupts in fresh laughter. Even some of the passengers, who had been silent at first, begin whispering and pointing. Sophie looks up, tears streaming down her cheeks. My dad is the best pilot in the whole world. That gets the biggest laugh, she declares with the conviction of an 8-year-old. Pilot Isabella dramatically clutches her stomach. Oh, honey, the cleaning ladies. Those who clean ordinary bathrooms probably call themselves pilots too. The humiliation reaches its peak. Sophie's sobs become audible. Ethan's calm breaks slightly. His breathing becomes measured and controlled, as before combat missions. He looks around the cabin at the faces laughing at his daughter's pain, memorizing them. Instead, he says nothing. He carefully adjusts Sophie's seatbelt, checking her comfort, whispering encouraging words in her ear. Every movement is deliberate, calm, precise, like a pilot conducting a pre-flight check. 30 minutes later, the plane begins to shake. This is not ordinary turbulence. This is something else. Strong, unpredictable jolts that scatter drinks and make passengers grip their armrests. The cabin lights flicker ominously. Sophie sobs, clinging to her father's hand. Nervous whispers roll through first class. Isabella clutches her glass of wine. Her earlier confidence evaporates with every shudder. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Rodriguez. The intercom crackles with static. We are experiencing a technical issue with our autopilot system. Please remain seated. Seated with your seatbelts fastened, you feel the shaking intensify. Oxygen masks fall from the overhead compartments. Several passengers scream. Isabella's face pales beneath her flawless makeup. The businessman in 3A is no longer laughing. He's frantically typing on his phone, likely trying to contact his lawyer or wife. "Dad, I'm scared," Sophie whispers. Ethan's training kicks in automatically. His breathing slows, his heart rate stabilizes. His eyes scan the cabin, assessing exits, calculating angles, reading the plane's behavior from vibrations. Most passengers can't comprehend it. This isn't just an autopilot failure. The plane is fighting its pilots. "Everything will be fine, princess," he tells Sophie calmly. "Remember what I always say about flying. The plane wants to fly," Sophie repeats through her tears. "You just have to help it." Remember how violently it shook after Isabella's glass smashed on the floor. The red liquid spread across the immaculate carpet like blood. The intercom crackles again. Captain Rodriguez's voice is tense now. His professional calm barely conceals his desperation. "This is the captain. An unusual request must be made. Is there a fighter pilot on board this aircraft? Please identify yourself to the crew immediately." The entire cabin falls silent. 150 passengers hold their breath. The only sound is the groan of the plane as it struggles against the forces trying to tear it apart. Isabella's eyes dart around the cabin, searching for someone to step forward. The businessman in seat 3A stares helplessly at his phone. The woman across from him clenches her fists and prays silently. No one moves. Seconds drag on like hours. Then Ethan unbuckles his seatbelt. "Daddy." Sophie's voice is quiet and confused. "Stay here, princess. Don't unbuckle yourself, no matter what. Can you do that for me?" Sophie nods, her eyes wide, as her father stands in the shaking plane. Ethan pulls something small and silver from his jacket pocket, a pilot's badge. Not the ID Sophie had been playing with, but his actual wings, the ones he earned with blood, sweat, and sacrifice, the ones he thought he'd never wear again. He pins them to his chest with steady hands. Isabella's mouth falls open. The plastic toy comment echoed mockingly in her memory. "I am Major Ethan Ward, United States Air Force," he announced clearly. His voice carried the authority of a man accustomed to decisions that could mean life or death. He'd retired with 2,000 hours of F-16 flight time. "I'm heading to the cockpit." The transformation was instant and complete. Gone was the quiet, humble single father. In his place stood a military officer who'd once flown combat missions over hostile territory, trusting his life to skill and training every time he took off. Isabella remembered snippets of stories her father had told her about military pilots, elite warriors, the best of the best. Something about a legendary pilot nicknamed the Phantom, who could fly anything, anywhere, anytime. No, that couldn't be true. Ethan strode confidently toward the cockpit, as if he belonged on the plane, not in the passenger cabin. The flight attendants parted for him as if he were royalty. "Wait!" Isabella cried desperately. I'm sorry, I didn't know." Ethan paused, turning briefly. His gaze met hers, and for a moment she saw something that made her blood run cold. Not anger, not vengeance, but simply a calm, calculating assessment. "A man who has spent years making split-second decisions in combat, ma'am," he said quietly. "I would suggest you pray about that. I'm as good as my daughter thinks I am." Then he disappears into the cockpit through the thin walls. The passengers hear anxious voices, rapid technical discussions, the sound of switches being pressed, and systems rebooting. The violent shaking of the plane gradually begins to subside. Isabella stands frozen in place. Thoughts race through her head. She remembers her father's war stories about the pilot who saved his unit in Afghanistan. The pilot who could control damaged planes that no one else could. The pilot they called the Phantom because he appeared out of nowhere when all hope was lost. Major Ethan Ward, the Phantom, and she mocked him, called him unfit for first class, belittled his daughter. 20 minutes pass. The plane completely stabilizes. Through the cockpit door, they hear Captain Rodriguez's voice, but now it is filled with relief and admiration. Ladies and gentlemen, we have successfully resolved our technical difficulties thanks to the assistance of Major Ward. We will be making an emergency landing at Denver International Airport in approximately 15 minutes. Emergency crews are on standby, but we anticipate a normal landing. The cabin erupts in jubilation and applause. Isabella can't join in. Too busy recalling every cruel word she uttered, every laughter she encouraged, every moment she shattered an 8-year-old girl's faith in humanity. The businessman in 3A glances around nervously. Did he say Major Ward, a fighter pilot? The woman across from him whispers. My husband was in the Air Force. He told me stories. As rumors spread through the cabin, the atmosphere shifts dramatically. Whispers turn to murmurs, and then into animated conversations about the legendary pilot sitting 3 rows behind, or, rather, currently saving their lives in the cockpit. Sophie sits alone in her seat, clutching her drawings, watching as the adults who laughed at her father now say his name with reverence and awe. She doesn't understand why they're suddenly interested in what she always knew, that her dad could always fly higher. When Ethan finally steps out of the cockpit, the entire cabin rises and applauds. His shirt is rumpled, beads of sweat on his forehead, but in his eyes is the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. He returns to his seat, as if walking through the quarter of glory. Isabella tries to catch his eye to apologize, but Ethan has eyes only for his daughter. Sophie's dad throws himself into his arms. I knew you could fix this. I knew you were the best pilot in the world, just doing your job, princess, he says quietly, hugging her tightly. But over Sophie's shoulder, his gaze sweeps across the cabin. Every passenger who laughed, every face that mocked his child, they all see him. Now the plane touches down at Denver International Airport, featherlight on the water. Perfect technique, flawless execution, the kind of landing that only comes with thousands of hours of experience and nerves of steel. As they taxi to the gate, the cabin buzzes with tension. Passengers who spent the first half of the flight mocking Ethan now steal glances at him, as if he were a celebrity. Captain Rodriguez emerges from the cockpit. His uniform is impeccable, but the strain of the last hour is evident on his face. He walks straight to Ethan's seat. Major Ward, he says, loud enough for everyone to hear. On behalf of myself, my crew, and every person on this airplane, thank you for what you did in the cockpit. I've been flying for 23 years. I've never seen anything like this in all those years, he says, extending his hand. Ethan stands and shakes it firmly. The hydraulics completely failed. Captain Rodriguez continues, addressing the passengers. We had no automated systems, no computer assistance. This man flew the plane manually for 27 minutes. In my opinion, he didn't just help. He saved every life on that plane. Spontaneous applause erupts in the cabin. Real applause, this time not the polite kind as before, but genuine gratitude and amazement. Isabella watches from her seat in the front row, her hands shaking slightly. The businessman in 3A, who just a few hours ago called Ethan awkward, now applauds enthusiastically. Major Captain Rodriguez adds, I've already contacted my airline's management. A full investigation will be conducted, and I recommend you for the company's highest civilian award. Ethan nods gracefully, but seems uncomfortable with the attention. I simply did what had to be done, Captain. No pilot would have done what you did. Captain Rodriguez interrupts firmly. No pilot would have done what you did. Most commercial pilots have never flown an airplane manually with a complete hydraulic failure. You had not only the skills, but the experience. Combat experience. An economy-class passenger suddenly appears at the first-class curtain. Sir, she calls to Ethan. Tears stream down her face. My son is only 4 years old, and he's in the back with my mother. Because of you, he'll be able to grow up. How can I even begin to thank you?" The others begin to rise. An older man wearing a veteran's cap approaches the major. "I served in Vietnam, in the army, not the Air Force, but I know what courage is. Thank you for your service then and now." The woman across from him, who had whispered the cruel remarks earlier, approaches hesitantly. "Sir, I owe you an apology. What I said earlier was unforgivable. You saved my life, and She can't finish her sentence. "Ma'am," Ethan says softly, "fear makes people say things they don't mean. You don't owe me anything." But she shakes her head. "I do. So do the other passengers." One by one they approach him, some apologizing directly, others simply wanting to shake his hand, some asking for autographs not because he's famous, but because he represents something they rarely encounter: quiet heroism. Sophie watches the procession, her eyes wide. An hour ago, these same people reduced her to tears, and now they treat her father like the hero in her drawings. Isabella stands frozen in place, watching the parade of redemption. Every apology makes her feel small, every handshake a reminder of her cruelty. Finally, she stands. The cabin slowly grows silent. She walks toward Ethan, her designer heels clicking on the floor like a countdown timer. She stops right in front of him, and, in front of every passenger who witnessed her earlier performance, does what cost her all her pride. She bows her head. "Major Ward," she says, her voice barely a whisper. "I have no excuse for my behavior, no explanation, no reason that makes it acceptable. I humiliated you and your daughter, and in return, you saved my life." She looks up to meet his gaze. "I am deeply, truly sorry." Sophie tugs at her father's shirt. "Dad, why does that mean ladies sometimes cry?" Ethan asks quietly. "People cry when they realize they've made a mistake." 3 hours later, after being interviewed by investigators, undergoing medical examinations and paperwork, Ethan and Sophie finally collected their luggage from the baggage carousel. The terminal was buzzing with camera crews and airline representatives, but they avoided the cameras. Sophie bounced next to her father, clutching a new drawing she'd made during the delay, a picture of him in the cockpit, his cape billowing behind him like a superhero. "Daddy, are you famous now?" "No, princess, just a pilot who did his job." But everyone clapped, capes tucked in, and said thank you. Ethan smiled, adjusting his daughter's backpack. Sometimes grown-up UPS employees forget that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when it's necessary. As they headed toward ground transportation, they heard a familiar voice behind them. "Major Ward, please hold." They turned to see Isabella approaching, but she looked different now. Her perfect hair slightly dulled, her makeup smudged from tears. She carried herself with less arrogance and more modesty. "I wanted to give you this," she says, holding out her business card. "My company specializes in aviation technology. We're always looking for consultants with your experience and qualifications." Ethan politely takes the card. "That's very kind, but this position comes with a significant salary increase over your current position." Isabella continues quickly. "A full benefits package, a flexible schedule to accommodate your daughter's interests, and stock options that could put her through college." She pauses, then quietly adds, "This isn't charity. After what I saw today, you would be the most qualified consultant we've ever hired." Ethan studies the card and then looks at Sophie, who's watching the conversation curiously. "I'll think about it," he finally says. Isabella nods gratefully. "Major, can I ask you a question? When I said those awful things before, why didn't you tell me who you were? You could have stopped it immediately." Ecuador. Ethan is silent for a long moment, watching the other passengers reunite with their families. "Ms. Lane," he finally says, "I served 8 years in the military, defending the right of people like you to say whatever you want, even if it's cruel." Besides, he looks down at Sophie, my daughter, needed to learn that dignity doesn't come from titles or uniforms. It comes from how you treat people when they can't do anything for you. Sophie tugs at his sleeve. "Daddy, what is dignity?" "It's the ability to fly high, even when others try to keep you grounded." Princess Isabella watches them go. The father and daughter who taught an entire plane load of strangers the difference between class and elegance. Later that evening, in her hotel room, Sophie shows Ethan her last drawing of the day. It depicts 2 figures, a tall man with silver wings and a little girl holding his hand. Above them, Written in pencil are the words, "My dad, my hero." Ethan pins the drawing to the wall of his hotel room and thinks about tomorrow's flight home. This time, he suspects the journey will be much more peaceful. Subscribe if you believe that true worth always takes flight.